Today we will be talking about a very open. All of you open your mobile phone and the note which I gave yesterday. মোবাইল ফোনে নোটটা ডাউনলোড করে যেটা করেছো সেটা খুলে বসো। So today we will be talking about limiting factors. We will be talking about limiting factors. So what are limiting factors actually? Limiting factors. And can anybody say what are limiting factors? বলতে পারো limiting factors? What do you mean by limiting factors? So it is actually an environmental condition. See, it's an environmental condition which limits the growth, distribution, or abundance of an organism or population within an ecosystem. So, you know what an ecosystem is? Living, non-living, interacting among themselves, that is an ecosystem. So, there is something called a limiting factor. Now, let us look at a limiting, what can be a limiting system? That is the particular element or the particular factor which will limit the growth and distribution of that organism in a particular ecosystem. So think of a pond ecosystem. Think of a pond ecosystem. In the pond ecosystem, what do you have? You have algae floating on the top, and you have fishes below, you have some underwater submerged plants below, and what could be? You have light above, sunlight is falling. What could be the limiting factor? What do you not have? So first, for the fish to survive, it needs to eat the plants. For the plants to survive, it needs sunlight. But more than sunlight, what you need over there is carbon dioxide to make photosynthesis and make sugar. And that sugar is eaten by the fish. Clear? So you need carbon dioxide present in the water, and this carbon dioxide is the limiting factor, because once there is no carbon dioxide, nothing will happen. The plants cannot make, even though there is sunlight, the plants cannot make sugar by photosynthesis. The plants cannot essentially they cannot synthesize their food. Not only their food, they are being eaten by fishes, zooplanktons, and they are also unable to get that food. So that particular component which limits the growth of organisms in an ecosystem, that is the limiting factor. In a different ecosystem, you have to first find what the limiting factor is. Which, suppose you are growing on a land ecosystem, soil, water, everything is there, but maybe you are missing magnesium over there. That is the limiting factor. Magnesium ko nikal do, growth gone. The ecosystem collapses. Okay, and not only collapses, there is also one more thing. It will grow to up to a certain size. How much will it grow? That is also determined by limiting factor. অল্প কার্বন ডাইঅক্সাইড আছে, অল্প গ্রোথ হবে. Lot of carbon dioxide, more growth. So this is the definition of limiting factor. So this limiting factor, essentially, there are two laws. Basically, first law is actually the two laws you have to study over here. One is Liebig's law of minimum, and the other is Shelford's law of tolerance. So what does Liebig's law of minimum state? Ekটু নিচেই আছে. It states that growth is not controlled by the total amount of resources available but by the scarcest resources. So you have a very rich, everything is available in the pond. The scarcest thing which is available is carbon dioxide. So growth of that ecosystem depends on amount of carbon dioxide which is present. Okay? This is Liebig's law of minimum. 1 month. Example, give the example of pond and carbon dioxide. And now limiting factors, two types. The first is density dependent. Second is density independent. And there is some people also call the third and fourth type, but the third type is physical and biological limiting factor. What are density dependent factor? It is dependent on the total size. The area is fixed. Density is number of organisms living in a fixed area. That is the density. That is fixed. So, if there are 100 deer in a plot of land, if there is 100 deer in a plot of land, and if there is 200 deer in that plot of land, so 200 is a more dense. So, simple thing, in an empty bus, all of you will get inside the bus. But if the bus is crowded, you will not get. In a bacterial growth, so it depends on the density. So there are density. For example, suppose if in a denser population, isko COVID ho gaya, everybody is close to each other, all of them will get affected. Okay, this is the problem with this is density dependent. Something of this can happen. So the number of maximum number of more dense, less population, less dense, more population, something like that. Then something like the density independent factors, flood, drought, agun. So I don't know if you have noticed, when we enter through the GT road side of our BV college, there is a jungle. There was a jungle. There was a huge jungle inside. Bang. There was a total ecosystem surviving over there. A total perfect community living over there. Different big trees, small trees, herbs, shrubs, grass, everything was there. Over there, sunlight was the limiting factor because you had a long canopy. Sunlight bhetore ঢুকতে পারছে না. That is going to stop the growth. Sunlight becomes the limiting factor. So, what happened suddenly? A density independent factor happened. The college wants to make a construction over there. What it does is somebody, I was in my home watering my plants in the garden, in my veranda. Suddenly I saw huge smoke coming out of it. Where did it catch fire? Then I saw the green building, maybe BV college. So on the road, I asked people, nobody knows anything. I came over here and saw that they were burning those forests over there. It was not there anymore. They want to make a construction. And they have not made a construction yet. So what happens? Again, the forest is being formed. This type of is known as succession, ecological succession. This is known as secondary succession. So briefly, I'll explain what succession is. So in a group of, in a land, there is a thriving ecosystem. One is a thriving ecosystem. The second, you have an empty land. So the first colonizers, you'll find lichens and moss, they will come and colonize over here. Lichens and moss will colonize. Then, after lichens and mosses have colonized, you have small grasses growing. Then, along with grasses will come grasshoppers. After grasshoppers, Moso, come and sit. ওইদিকে যাও না, ক্লাস নিচ্ছি। আচ্ছা, so you will see that first there is a empty space over here. You will find grasses growing. Then from the grass, you'll have grasshoppers coming out. From the grasshoppers, suddenly you'll find birds coming over here. Larger trees will come. After the trees will grow, then after you'll have a final community that is known as climax community. The first community which came, lichens and shrubs, they are known as pioneer community, climax community. Then this there is a fire. That climax community, it collapses. Okay. When the climax community collapses, then what happens? What you've seen over here, secondary succession takes place. Again, you can see small shrubs, small grass growing. The tall trees are not there yet, but within few days they will start growing if they don't again destroy it. So this is a density independent factor: fire, flood, drought. This is also going to restrict the growth of organism. And physical and biological dependent factors: parasitism, competition, predation, herbivory, and several abiotic factors, availability of oxygen, salinity, light, food. You can place them under density independent factors also. You can place them under, in some books they will place them as density factors. So what are the examples of limiting factors? First is resources: food, water, light, space, center. Shelter. So if an organism or group of population doesn't have enough resource to sustain it, individuals will die through starvation. ঠিক আছে, খাবার নেই, মরতে শুরু করবে। ওই যে examples of limiting factor দেখছো তোমরা ওইখানটা। So in the case of photosynthesis organisms, carbon dioxide is important. In case of a forest, huge forest, sunlight essential, so they are resources. Then availability of nutrients in the soil: nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, potassium, they are all needed. NPKs, they are all needed for the growth. Now there is one more thing which you must read, is what is meant by carrying capacity. The limiting resource within an ecosystem determines the carrying capacity. It is denoted by K. Under a particular, what does K means? Carrying capacity. That particular ecosystem, how much individuals can it sustain? Maximum number, that is the carrying system. In this room, maximum 40 students can sit. That is the carrying system. If more come, then one has to get out. Okay, it's a carrying system. Maximum amount of load an ecosystem can carry. Next, let us go down to the next point, which is environmental conditions. There is an example: limiting with lots of rain. Plants which like dry weather cannot grow there. Or maybe because of wet, humid weather, disease and all, দেখবে যে এখানে ফাঙ্গাস ছাতা ধরে মরে গেল, fungal disease, it will die of fungal disease. Then go to the next point in the next page: biotic factors. Predation, herbivory, parasite. কাছাকাছি থাকলে কোভিড ঢুকলো, কতজন মরে গেল? Because people were not maintaining the distance. Some place they were unable to maintain distance. So the next part which we go, predator prey. One more thing: suddenly you find you kill all the deers, then the lions will have nothing to eat. They will come and start raiding the nearby villages. It is not their first choice. Okay. And human limiting factors. Human beings have done so much. Now space is in Asansol. Why is there a water problem? Main reason is lots of flats are being constructed. টিউবওয়েল করে they are draining out all the water in flats. Groundwater table is going down. Not only that, there were recharge points like lots of swamps, open fields, where this rainwater accumulates, goes down, and it replenishes the groundwater. But because of what we are doing is because of this particular problem of living, the city is growing. What you are doing is you are closing these spaces. Where I live in Murgasol, behind there is a place called Anand Vihar Housing Complex. There used to be a huge swamp land. It was a very strong recharging point. Now it's being closed, and Anand Vihar apartment housing complex has been constructed. So that swamp recharge point is being closed. Rather, what people are drawing water from the soil also. And this groundwater table is going, limiting resource. Then you are cutting down forests. All the animals and plants and all these diseases, they were supposed to be away from human localizations. But now they have no place to go. They are coming into our cities. All different disease-bearing animals. And these viruses are mutating and affecting us. This is also a type of limiting factor. Now let us go to the next place, laws of limiting factor. The first law which I told, Liebig's law of minimum. So, the availability, go to the line after below Liebig's barrel. The principle of Liebig's law, have you find out that place? 1.1 এর পাশের জায়গাটা, 1.1 ফিগার তার পাশের জায়গাটা. The principle of Liebig's law conclude as a concept the availability of nutrient in scarcity is the limiting factor. যেটা সবথেকে কম পাওয়া যায়, that is the limiting factor. ঠিক আছে, অন্য জিনিস বেশি থাকলে হবে না, আমাকে ওইটা চাই যেটা সবথেকে কম পাওয়া যায় ওই জায়গায়, that is the limiting factor. Okay, so water এর মধ্যে কি limiting, carbon dioxide কম পাওয়া যায়, therefore that is the limiting factor. Now there is this 1.5.2 te jao, next page it. Blackman's law of limiting factor. So Blackman essentially was a plant physiologist who did most of the studied on the limiting factors of the plant photosynthetic system. What he stated that a number of factors, they regulate the biological processes, but the factors in different amount affect the processes on the whole. For example, photosynthesis require basic components. What you require photosynthesis? Water, you need sunlight, proper intensity, chloroplast temperature, carbon dioxide, chlorophyll presence in certain required amounts. So any one of these factors, যে কোনো একটা কমে গেলেই organism grow করবে না. Okay, if any one of these factors is present in scarcity, it will affect the rate of photosynthesis, and if it affects the rate of photosynthesis, it cannot grow. Now what he did was, in photosynthesis he saw what was most important. You can see the figure 1.1.2. okay, he saw that growth of first is rate of photosynthesis on the left y-axis, x-axis is CO2 concentration. So CO2 concentration he knows in this is important. So you have low light intensity, A, rate of photosynthesis সবথেকে কম হচ্ছে. Medium light intensity, please, a little more. Higher light intensity, most. So this particular graph explains Blackman's this particular graph, it highlights Blackman's law of limiting factor. Okay, and I personally like Blackman's law much more because, for example, in pond, carbon dioxide is important, no doubt, but then suddenly oxygen is also important. If too much plants over there, oxygen amount will increase. Too much is not good. If too much animals over there, lots of carbon dioxide, oxygen will short. The fishes will start to die, absence of oxygen. If there is too less of minerals, the plants also need minerals for growth. It will not grow. So it's just one step. Anything which is the scarcest, Liebig gave one limiting factor. Okay. Now he told that anything which becomes scarce is the limiting factor. And the next thing which we will study is Shelford's law of tolerance. देखिए तोला कोता है law of tolerance, Shelford's law. So till now what we were talking on minimal factors affecting the growth rate of biological process. But Shelford's law, what does it state? It states that it's not only the factor present in the scarcity, but also the excess abundance of that same factor. That can also affect the growth, development of that organism. So for that, he introduced a term known as zone of tolerance. That is zone of tolerance. Are you able to see that? Zone of tolerance? देखो तो. So then go below down to that graph 1.1.3. Now what does this graph show? On the left side, low, tolai left side, low, right side, high, and in between there is a gradient. কম থেকে বেশি যাচ্ছে. Gradient means from low to high. This is a gradient. ঠিক আছে? From low to high. And on the y axis, you see low. This is the population axis. Low population below, high population above. Now, you will see the maximum population, it resides in the zone of tolerance. Low, not high also, but in between. Maximum population, they will survive in this particular region. And that is the optimal range. That is the zone of tolerance. Okay. Then, say for example, if that particular thing, if you go more towards the right, you reach the critical maximum zone. Or that critical maximum zone. And on the left side, you will reach the critical minimum zone where the population starts to decline. Okay. Population starts to decline and then it will not grow. Zone that is the zone of intolerance. Both on the no species, both on the left as well as both on the right. Too much carbon dioxide, it will up to an optimal level of carbon dioxide, it will start, plants will grow. Too much, their growth will be hampered because lots of plants, they need also oxygen in the night. It will start to hamper. And excess, after that, only carbon dioxide, no oxygen, everything will die. No species. Similarly, too much oxygen, no carbon dioxide, right sided, it will die. So this is the Shelford's law of tolerance. So you have the optimal, so you have the two zones, the optimal zones, B the देखो. দেখেছো? The first is the optimal zone, most favorable zone in the center. Then you have the critical minimum zone. Then you have the critical maximum zone. Clear? তোমরা বুঝতে পারছো? ক্রিটিক্যাল মিনিমাম জোন কমের দিকে, ক্রিটিক্যাল ম্যাক্সিমাম জোন বেশির দিকে, আর অপটিমাল জোন মাঝখানে, and beyond them zone of intolerance. So there are two words used. One is URI, and another is steno. What does URI mean and what does steno mean? কেউ বলতে পারবে? What does URI halide mean? URI means you can tolerate wide variety. So if you say use the word URI halide, it means it can able to tolerate a wide range of salinity. ঠিক আছে? URI halide, halide means salinity. URI thermal, it can tolerate a wide range of temperature. We are URI thermals. আমরা -20 তেও বাঁচতে পারি, +50-60 অবধিও বাঁচতে পারি। Okay, we can live, but our growth will be limited. At 60 degrees, you don't start get romantic feelings and start to reproduce. Neither -20 তেও ওরকম ইচ্ছে করে না। প্রপার জায়গাতে ম্যাক্সিমাম অপটিমাল টেম্পারেচার, সুন্দর এসি চালানো আছে, 15-20 degrees, perfect. Organisms will start to grow. Human beings will reproduce like anything. Rabbits also, but if you go to the 50-60 degrees, it will not. Or if you go to -20, -30, it will not. Okay. So this is the word URI, and steno means short range. Some plants can only, you need a temperature 20 to 27 degrees, only some organisms can grow. Temperature বেড়ে গেলেও মরে যাবে, temperature কমে গেলেও মরে যাবে. Clear? So the URI and steno. So if you talk about URI halide, wide or steno halide, wide or limited concentration of salt. Thermal temperature, URI thermal, steno thermal. Clear? So this is the laws of limiting factor. Clear? End of my class today. Questions আছে? Clear তো? আমি কটা দিন আমি